Thank you, Min. Thank you all so much. Is this working? Yeah, we got enough sound. Very glad to be here for all of you. 各位领导，大家好。So I'm going to be doing most of the talk in English because there are people watching apparently from all over, and 你们都会，所以没问题。So I am very happy to be here at Google. I've been in Beijing now for about 7 years. I originally came as Min mentioned, as a Fulbright scholar. Fulbright's a government program with the U.S. and Chinese governments work together to do scholarly exchange across the country. So American researchers come to China, and Chinese researchers go to America. My Fulbright project was to learn about Chinese comedy, specifically Xiangsheng, by apprenticing to Master Ding Guangquan and learning how to do Chinese comedy. So I'm going to do a little bit of intro about what is the Chinese comedy. But before that, I want to show you a little clip about the Western style of comedy that's just starting in China, 脱口秀, or as we call it in English, stand-up comedy. I'm going to show you a little clip from one of the shows that I was on before. This is called 80s Talk Show. Who has watched 80s Talk Show? Almost all of you. There we go. That's about what I expected. So for those of you who haven't watched it, you've lost your opportunity because it's off the air now. But this is a clip of, I want to show you a clip of me performing on the 80s Talk Show doing some jokes that I wrote. So here we go.
谢谢。接下来上场这位嘉宾呢是一个外国人，他在中国呢待了不短的时间。那最近他的身边又发生了哪些趣事儿？来，让我们欢迎艾杰西。
大家好，我叫艾杰西。先自我介绍吧，我叫艾杰西大家都看成我上来就听到我的声音，都知道我不是北京人我不是北京，我是东北人。我真的是东北人，对，我是美国东北的，对，老家是波士顿那嘎的。今天的主题是算什么男人，所以我以为什么是男人呢？我觉得男人就是能实现自己的理想，就是一个男人。所以我最早就是我有一个梦想，就是我要当一个脱口秀演员。然后，但是我的中国朋友都知道我是一个什么全职的脱口秀演员，中国的脱口秀演员，他们会问，哎，那你父母怎么想呢？所以我上次回国的时候，我也问了我爸，我说，哎，爸，我做中国的脱口秀演员，你有什么想法？然后他回了一句 ，Speak English 。但是其实这个我不仅在中国说脱口秀，我也拜师学中国的传统相声。真的，我是丁广泉的徒弟所以拜丁老师，丁老师也有粉丝在。因为就是作为一个职业的脱口秀演员，你有什么表演的机会，你都得抓到2个月前我有了一个机会，我上了一个大游轮，做一个大游轮的一个脱口秀演出，然后当时我都从来没上过，我就觉得哇，特别好的机会。我上了台以后发现，就是1400人的一个大剧场，但观众都是小孩子和大妈。然后我也没习惯，我这跟80后的观众群稍微不一样。我发现了小孩子听脱口秀特别好，因为你说什么话他们都会笑。我真的是，哎，我昨天有点累，孩子就哇，他累了。孩子是很好的观众，大妈不一样。如果大妈觉得一个笑话好笑，她不会笑，她就会，然后跟那个对面的朋友说一下，这个好笑。今天的主题算什么男人？就是什么是一个男人就是实现自己的理想，就是男人。我最早来的到中国，我有2个理想，就是我要当个脱口秀演员，第二我要学会中文。所以本来是有这么一个情况，但是我发现了其实这个很难，因为大家都说哇中文太难学，中文最难学。中文难学在哪儿？大家都不信我。中文最难学的就是中国人都要跟我说英语。大家看到了有一个外国人进场就来了一个外国人，来了一个说英语的机会。然后跟我开始说话的hello， 但我要学中文嘛，所以我还得假装不说英语。所以说不好意思，我不说英语，我是冰岛人。冰岛人。其实学中文，其实一个难题是我发现，我跟一个新中国朋友聊天的时候，我跟他们说的第一句话和他们给我回的第一句话没有任何关系。 因为无论我说的是哎你好，是你是不是谁的朋友，是我是不是认识你，无论我说的是什么，他们的回答就是哇你中文说的这么好。我发现了，任何情况都是这个情况。有一次我骑电动车的时候，然后有一个女人，她就闯了闯了路，闯了红灯，然后我就无意中撞到她了。这就速度不高，但是我也很着急。我说：“哎，你还好吗？你还好吗？”然后她看到，哎，中文说的这么好。在中国几年了？会用筷子吗？真的是这样，我也发现，就大家跟我说的第一句话都是这一句话，中文说这么好，但是不同的地方的人，他们都说的不一样，所以发现北方人和南方人真不一样。北方人他看到了我说你好，他们说哇你中文说的这么好，南方人不一样，南方人就说哇你的普通话很标准。但老外更不一样，我跟老外说哎你好，他们说 Speak English。对，找新的朋友很难。就是第一句话就是哇，中文说这么好。第二句话是什么？第二句话是大家都要知道我是不是认识他们的其他的唯一的外国朋友。所以他们说哦，哎，Jesse，你认识 Jack 吗？我说 Jack， 他姓什么的？哎，我忘了，他叫 Jack 嘛的。哦，他也是美国人。然后这我就冷静了，你也知道这是美国人3个亿吗？他说对呀，人口少。我以为你会认识他，但我的美国朋友也一模一样。我的美国朋友都知道我是他们的唯一的住在中国的朋友，他们会给我打电话，他们说：“哎，杰西啊，我有个朋友，他是中国人，他住北京，他姓张，你认识吗？”非常感谢大家，我是艾杰西。
There we go. Yeah. So this is part of the fun of what I've been doing here is I've been trying to mix learning the traditional Chinese style Xiangsheng and also doing the Western styles in Chinese. There's a little Chinese, there's a little English, you got a little bit of everything. And that led me to creating what we've created now in Beijing, which is a US-China Comedy Center. We have a courtyard that we've turned into a theater near Gulou. So it's on Gulou Dongjie. So if you are interested in coming, you can come by, come to some events. We do shows, we do workshops, and then sometimes we take the material that we work on in the club and then we can put it onto the TV shows. So it's a great time. But first off, I want to tell you all a little bit about Xiangsheng. So you all are from China, but we have some people watching who are not from China. And even I've found that a lot of people from China, they know a little bit about Xiangsheng, but they haven't necessarily studied it that much, or they've maybe seen it on TV once or twice, but don't know as much about it as my master, my shifu did. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro to what is Xiangsheng and then tell you about my experience learning it. So Xiangsheng is a traditional Chinese performance art. It's a comedy performance art. 2 people on stage. You have a joker and a straight man. They go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth doing their jokes. We do Xiangsheng in many different places. We do it all over. We do Xiangsheng on stage. We do Xiangsheng in my friend's living room. We do Xiangsheng basically wherever we get the chance. In China, traditionally, we have these tea rooms, these tea houses where you watch Xiangsheng shows. And if you go to see a show, the audience will will sit down and people will go up and they'll do these routines. The newer people might do 10 to 15 minutes. Then the headliners, like the biggest performers, might do over an hour. They go back and forth and do their jokes. And people really like it, including this guy behind me who had the loudest laugh of anyone I had ever heard. His laugh was like a car horn. It's like every time there was a joke, immediately from behind, he would just go like, ha, just like straight through. And it was the moment, like the half second when I got the joke, but when he didn't get the joke was the best half second of the show. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a clip of what the Xiangsheng actually winds up looking like. This is me performing with my Xiangsheng master, Ding Guangquan.
反应也特别好，真的。我跟你说，这个美国人特别爱京剧哦，也喜欢京剧。对对对，我们走到哪儿都是城城爆满。嚯，对，大家也给我们叫好哦，喜欢听，大家都给我们说，哇 ，Yeah， that's 北京啊，that's 北京啊，
这怎么说？这个京剧观众啊，这咱还真没听说过这么叫好的，非常喜欢哦。
So you can see it goes, you have this rhythm that you get between the two performers. It's a lot about the pacing and the timing and the feel of it. Sitting there live as you see the performers go back and forth. There's two roles on stage. There's the Dougen, which is the Joker, and then the Penggen, who's more like the straight man. So it's a little bit like even in a lot of countries around the world, I found they have this like two-person comedy style with the Joker and the funny man. In America, there was a comedy style called vaudeville, which was popular in America in the 1910s and 1920s, back when the radio was very popular. And they have a lot of routines that if you listen to them now sound a little bit like Xiangsheng. And so even though the Joker is a little bit funnier and the straight man's a little bit more serious, they're both kind of funny people usually. So it's not overly serious. And the Joker, even though they're funny, they're not always crazy. They're sometimes like, relatively regular until they have to come out with a joke. So usually when we perform these routines, we have to memorize both halves of the work because you need to know what's going to be happening, even though you might only be playing one role. And then usually the more experienced comedian will play the straight man. The Joker is always on the left and the straight man is always on the right. So for Chinese audiences, when they know this, they just know this at a certain level. And so when you do shows for the Chinese audience, they'll read it differently. Like for instance, there's this one comedy bit called Lun Peng Dou, traditional Xiangsheng piece. It's about discussing being the Joker and the straight man, where the Joker and a straight man get into a fight about whether it's harder to be the Joker or the straight man. And then in order to show that they're both right, they switch places and the whole routine just falls apart. So this works because the Chinese audience knows that there's a Joker and a straight man. And if you did that for an American audience that you don't know there's going to be a Joker and a straight man, then the routine might not be as funny. Xiangsheng is actually very interesting because it comes originally from a street performance art. So in the late Qing dynasty in the 1800s, one of the Qing emperors died, and they forbid any Beijing opera from being performed in the city for what turned out to be 2 years. But at the time, nobody knew how long it would be before they could sing opera again. And back then, if you were a Beijing opera performer, you spent your whole life from like 3 years old only doing opera. So these performers had a problem, which is that they had this one skill and they weren't able to use it to make a living. So they went onto the streets and everybody created what they call the minor art forms, the qi. And so these art forms came from people that had performance skills and trying to figure out how to make new performance styles out of the skills they learned from Beijing opera. So there was one clown, the Chou from the Beijing opera, who was named Qiongbu Pa. His stage name was Qiongbu Pa, which is I do not fear poverty in English. His name sounds way better in Chinese. But he started telling jokes on the street, and he realized that people were coming around him and he could make money doing shows on the street. And he thought, hey, if I have a second person, we're going to be twice as loud. We're going to make twice as many jokes. And so he took a first disciple, and then that disciple took another disciple, and then that disciple took another disciple. And so what we have in Xiangsheng is this master-student relationship, which is actually very unique among comedy. In America, there are a lot of comedians, but there's not usually a master and a student. But because of the way that Xiangsheng started, we have this whole master-student family tree going all the way back into the past. So I'm a member of the 8th generation of Xiangsheng performers. Master Ding was a member of the 7th, and then Hou Baolin, who is his master, was a member of the 6th generation. And so one of the most amazing parts about my time here studying comedy was getting to study with a master like Master Ding. Master Ding did comedy basically his entire life. He performed for more than 50 years, and he had gone through all these different periods of China, doing comedy at every point, trying to figure out a way to make people laugh. And the master is not only the teacher on stage, but also off stage. So he gave me lots of advice in terms of how do you go prepare for shows. When you meet people at a TV station, you want to be very, very nice to the director, but then you also need to find his assistant, because if you want to go back on the show, you need to call the assistant. The director's not going to return your call. So you have to do all of these different things in order to be a good performer. And Master Ding would teach all the tricks. He also taught me just even little tricks right before the show. Like one time we went to perform, and we perform these dagua, which are these robes. And one time I brought my robe, and my robe was folded incorrectly, and so it was all creased. And he was very unhappy. He's like, "Oh, this is no good. This is no good." Okay, here, 这样，你把那个放在桌子上. He's like, "Put it on the table." And then he's like, "你有水吗?" I'm like, "You have any water?" So I was like, "Yeah, you got water." And so he takes the water, and he just goes like this. And he sprays the water all over the table. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Pull." And so we're on the other side, and we pull the robe tight, and actually got most of the wrinkles out. So these are the little things. And then I swear he turns to me and he says, "Nobody spits like that anymore." I'm like, "You are correct." That was fantastic. So I had a fantastic time learning with Master Ding. Unfortunately, Master Ding passed away last year in 2018. And so since then, it's been a lot harder to learn crosstalk. But he has his disciples, and then his disciples have their disciples. And so even though we lost a lot of knowledge when Master Ding passed away, he passed that knowledge down on to people like me, and then people who know even more than me. So if you go and talk to a Chinese person about Xiangsheng, about crosstalk, they'll say, "Oh, I know Xiangsheng 说学逗唱." 说学逗 and 唱, the 4 skills are the main skills that a Xiangsheng performer has to learn. So they mean 说 is speak, 学 is imitate, 逗 is joke, and then 唱 is sing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction into each of these skills and how we do them. So 说, the speaking skill, is talking about how Xiangsheng, it's a linguistic performance art. It's not about just saying the words. It's about saying the words in the right way that draws the audience into the performance. And so that speaking skill of the way to change your voice and the way you speak to bring people in is one of the most important things of the entire art form. In order to show off the speaking skill, sometimes we do these things that are called guangkou, which are these little monologues. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're not, but they're designed to show off the speaking skill of the performer. And so I'm going to do a little guangkou for you now. This one is called Dilitu, the map. It's a whole bunch of country names next to each other. You can see what the speaking skill is like. It goes like this. 太平洋、印度洋、大西洋、北冰洋、欧洲、亚洲、非洲、美洲、大洋洲、东亚、南亚、西亚、东南亚、韩国、朝鲜、蒙古、日本、越南、印度、缅甸、老挝、新加坡、菲律宾、尼泊尔、印度尼西亚、孟加拉、亚美尼亚、斯里兰卡、冰岛、丹麦、瑞典、芬兰、波兰、捷克、德国、法国、奥地利、乌克兰、爱尔兰、小奥地利、马尔斯拉夫、摩尔多瓦、比利时、沙特阿拉伯、亚、玻利维亚、阿尔巴尼亚，还有贝宁、埃及、多哥、刚果、马利、坦扎、科摩罗、摩洛哥、冈比亚、柬埔寨、直到几内亚、澳大利亚、新西兰、萨尔瓦多、尼日兰、洪都拉斯、墨西哥、美国、加拿大。Okay. So, wow, well, they do it. So yeah, so this is fun. So if you were to put that in a comedy routine, when maybe the straight man is like, "Oh, Jesse, I haven't seen you for a while." Like, "Yeah, I was traveling." "Oh, where were you traveling?" "I was in, Chaoxian, Mongol, Ruben, Yuan, Indu, Mian, Lao, Singapore, Philippines, it just keeps going on. So they get incorporated into the comedy, and this is one of the ways of that Xiangsheng is a little bit unique from Western style comedies like stand up. Next is 学 or imitate. So just like in Western style comedy and stand-up, when you go on stage as a comedian, you play yourself, but you also play everybody else in the world. So if you are a comedian, you don't go on stage and say, "And then I told my mom I can't find a job." And my mom says, "Why can't you find a job?" And I told her, "Well, it's not that easy." You don't just say the words, you play the characters. Like, "Mom, I can't find a job." "Why can't you find a job?" "It's not easy." You get in and you imitate all the people. In the traditional Chinese comedy, this also means imitating a lot of accents, imitating a lot of like fangyan or like different dialects of Chinese, because even though most Xiangsheng is performed in Mandarin, a lot of times you'll have dialect coming in. And so the ability to change between characters is very important. So one of the jokes that we do that uses the imitation technique is I talk about one of the fun parts about being an American who speaks Chinese when I go back to America. Because in China, there are people like me that speak Chinese, but in America, people that look like me, like 0% chance I speak Chinese, right? Like it's totally my secret superpower. So like last time that I was back home in Boston, there are a lot of Chinese exchange students in Boston. I heard 2 exchange students talking on the street. Just these 2 girls. They're like, "Oh, 今天我们要去看什么电影啊? Oh, 我不知道." And then I don't know why I just came up behind them. I'm like, "美女!" And they turn around like, they're like, "You could have sworn there was like a Beijing cab driver right behind me. Like, where is it?" "It's just me there on my phone." Like, "No, I don't want to go today." Not feeling good. so that sort of performance technique of turning, hey everybody, I'm Jesse, like like that shift into playing the characters and the accent, that's the imitation technique. Dou is joking. So the Chinese friends know this is Guo Degang, who's probably one of the most famous Xiangsheng performers right now. And I always get really jealous of him because he just looks funny. So I'm like, I have to try. He's like, everyone's like, this is great. But yeah, so one of the interesting questions I had when I came over as a researcher, because I started studying Xiangsheng as a Fulbright scholar, and one of the questions I had was, I knew that what people would joke about would be different in the different countries, but I was very interested as a comedian about the skills, the way that you make people laugh. Are those the same or are those different? And so I was very happy that Master Ding had actually already written a book in which he listed all the different ways that Xiangsheng performers get people to react. So there's exaggerations, there's puns, there's a lot of them, rule of three, praising sun. No, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. Don't worry about it. But the point is that even a lot of these things, even though they seem kind of funny translated into English, breaking norms, absurd exaggeration, mixed logic, this stuff is all funny everywhere. So all of the techniques, the exaggerations, puns, metaphor, inverted logic, all of this is what makes comedy funny. And then really what makes Chinese comedy feel Chinese is it's about percentages. It's like how many puns is too many puns? How many, what type of character works here? What type of character works there? How do you do it? But not necessarily about the technique itself. It's about, figuring out what the ratios are that when you perform for a Chinese audience, it references back all the years and years and years of comedy that they've watched in their own country. Or if you're doing it for Americans, the same thing, that uses all the American comedy that people have grown up watching and don't even know. But then when you do a comedy show, you can call it back and use what they have in their head. So very interesting. And then finally, there's Chang singing because Xiangsheng originally came from a Beijing opera background. A lot of traditional opera pieces or different type of singing have come back into the art form, and they're still done in the traditional pieces today. So one of the pieces that we do is a piece called Chang Sanguo, or Singing the Three Kingdoms. And then when I perform this piece, my character is the one that I showed you from the clip before. I just returned from America where I started a Beijing opera troupe. My master goes, oh, you do Beijing opera? I love Beijing opera. Let's do some Beijing opera. I'm like, oh, great. Let's do it. Let's sing some Three Kingdoms opera. And it gets confusing because he's thinking about the Three Kingdoms of Wei, Shu, and Wu, and I'm thinking about the Three Kingdoms of America, Mexico, and Canada. So we get mixed up pretty quickly. Eventually he gets really frustrated. He's like, Jesse, can you sing Beijing opera, like real Beijing opera? I'm like, yeah, I can sing Beijing opera. It goes, 主动上马心不爽，山人八卦袖内藏，将身皆作中军长，等到捉着一得张苍贼苍。Like that. No. We're in Beijing. Do we have any actual Beijingers in here? Any Beijingers here? We have 1, 2. Was that okay? Was that good? Yes. Okay, good? Okay, good. I'm always scared when I ask if they're actual Beijingers, because if you just go, no. Everyone's like, well, I believe her. But it's fun. So I learned, in part of learning Xiangsheng, I learned some Beijing opera. I learned some Shandong opera. I learned some Huangmei Xi, Anhui opera. And all of this, interestingly enough, is completely useless for finding a job. Technically, there's a special type of singing called Taiping Gezi, which is special to Xiangsheng. When they say Chang, they're actually talking about Taiping Gezi, but that's really old and not many people do it anymore. And it's a little bit less interesting than the Beijing opera, so I put this here. So a lot of people, especially when I go back to America, they're like, oh, you do comedy in China. What are they talking about? And the answer is actually pretty simple. They're all talking about you. No, they're not talking about you. There's all sorts of different things. There's obviously anything from everyday things. You know, my phone battery ran out, and then my girlfriend called me, and I didn't answer the phone. She gets upset. Everything from everyday things. But one of the things that makes Xiangsheng very interesting is you also have these 传统Xiangsheng, these traditional pieces that have been passed down from master to student over the last 100 years. So I'm going to perform one more of these guangkou for you, and I can show you a little bit about what those traditional pieces are like, and then also we'll get a little bit into a translation and how do you translate comedy. And I know there's some translators here, so maybe some interesting translation theory for you guys. So I'm going to perform one more guangkou. We'll talk about it and we'll see what the content's like. This is a piece called 小孩子, little children. And so this is a story, a bunch of different children in Chinese history who have done amazing things at young ages or have done incredible things. And so it goes like this. 再想当初 大宋朝文彦博，幼儿窦佑冠阙扶裘之志，司马温公道佑破瓮救儿之谋，汉孔融4岁就董穰礼谦逊之礼，十三郎5岁朝天，唐柳燕7岁举翰林，韩黄香9岁问起方巾，秦刚罗12岁有宰相之才，武周瑜13岁百为水军都督汤代，千军万马，执掌6镇81州之兵权，吃苦肉献连环，借东风烧战船，使曹操望风熟寸，险些丧命江南，虽有卧龙和凤雏之相帮，那周瑜也算小孩子中之魁首。就在这，哎，好。So I love doing that, especially for Americans, because they're like, okay. They're like, what is that? Are we all good with this? What's going on? Oh, 没有人解释啊，你处理一下啊，怎么啊？回来了啊。So this is funny because Americans are like, you know, they're like, you know, so what did you just do? And I'm like, oh, easy. It was this. And they're like, okay, what does that mean? And this is where you hit that translation problem, because if you translate it, it just goes, long ago, Wen Yanbo of the great Song dynasty realized when he was a child the knowledge he could float a ball up from a hole by pouring in water. But what does that mean? And it's a story. So the story is Wen Yanbo is a kid in the Song dynasty. He loses his ball down a hole, but he very cleverly realized, hey, if I pour water in the hole, the water level will rise. I can get my ball back. Which is to say that, you know, children sometimes come up with clever solutions to problems that maybe adults wouldn't have thought up. And if you know that the story has that meaning, then you can say, hey, actually, that's not any different from an idea that could be understood in the West. Like they have the exact same thing in the West. They like talking about kids who have done amazing things at young ages too. And so that got me thinking about whether you could make a Western version of this piece where instead of Zhou Yu, who's famous for leading an army at a young age, what if you use Joan of Arc, who's famous for leading an army at a young age? So I wrote my own English version of the 小孩子, and then I put it syllable to syllable, sound to sound, along with the original one, and it sounds like this. In ancient times, King David the Israelite won his kingdom with 5 stones and a slingshot. The English poet Pope's 5-year-old hand scrawled poems still read today. Beethoven, at the age of 8, performed his own original compositions. Blaise Pascal's first proof was written in chalk. At the age of 15, Howard Philip Lovecraft conceived of a hidden monster. John Stuart Mills at 8 spoke several dead languages. Carl Benz at 15 became an engineer. Joan of Arc at the age of 17 picked up her sword and banner and rode to the town of Orleans, where she led the charge, stormed the gates, drove the English out of France, and put to death herself, even though her life was short. Still, Joan of Arc should be counted as an example amongst the greatest of children. And so this is one of the things I talk about, because I get a chance to do this show oftentimes at colleges or for Americans who are learning Chinese or for Chinese who are learning English. And when you get to translation, I like showing this translation, not because it's a good translation. It's actually a bad translation linguistically because all the words are wrong. But it's a translation. I call this more of like a cultural translation. So for people that do translation, there's going to come a point, and it's probably not that long from now, when Google's going to be able to do everything translation-wise perfectly for language. But that's not going to help us solve this problem, which is to say, why do we speak to each other in the first place? Human beings like stories, peoples, names, places, culture. That's what helps people from different places work together. If we just need to know the word for steak in another language, we're going to have the technology done already. So that technology is great because it's going to relieve pressure on a lot of people from learning the language and the pure language problems. And it lets us do more complicated, more interesting stuff about if I have a story I want to tell in your culture, you have a creative problem that I might have a solution for. Can we find the people, the names, the places, the stories that will help us figure out how to work out together? And that's the sort of thing that I think the next part of the cultural translation between China and the West, this is what we need to be able to do, to have the Americans be able to say, hey, I see what you're doing and we have a story for that. We have something that can get your people excited. And then the other way around, where Chinese people have a story in Chinese culture, they say, this is going to be able to make Americans excited and get everybody moving in the same direction. So this oftentimes is what causes a lot of cultural misunderstanding, is if you looked at 大宋朝文彦博要儿到右, and the Americans are like, okay, what is that? That is completely different. It looks really wrong. It looks not like what we're doing. But actually, the two cultures had the same idea. The same idea of children at young ages doing interesting things is interesting. That same idea goes across. And so a lot of times when we have cultural misunderstanding, it's because our knowledge of the other culture is like a mirror. But if that mirror is warped because our understanding is not that good, then what comes back looks very scary, even though if it was never actually scary in the first place. So this is what I call the secret of trying to do comedy in another culture, is find out what Chinese people do, know, find out what Westerners know. And in the middle, there's this big lol section where we have all the laughs. And everything in there we can make jokes about, and we'll be able to understand from each other's jokes. And what I would say, and my big thing that I'm doing with my life, is I think this area is way bigger than people think it is. Because my experience of living here has been that once you can communicate with somebody, almost everything falls into there. Like, you know, maybe there's some stuff that doesn't, but almost everything does. And so this has gotten me to do a couple experiments in translating comedy to see if comedy works or not. I'm gonna show you guys another video or two. This is Mitch Hedberg. You guys don't know Mitch Hedberg, do you? Nobody? No one knows Mitch Hedberg in China. That's fine. But Mitch Hedberg is a hilarious stand-up comedian. And we had a show a couple years ago in Beijing where we were asked to take our favorite comedians' jokes and then perform them ourselves. And so I picked Mitch Hedberg's jokes because I love Mitch Hedberg's jokes, and they're very weird. The pace is weird. The topics are weird. It's like very funny to me, but it's not something I had ever seen done in Chinese before. But when I thought about it, I was like, all his jokes should fall in that middle area. I should be able to do this. So I translated the Mitch Hedberg jokes into Chinese, and I did them at a club in Gulo. And so here's the video of me doing Mitch Hedberg jokes in Chinese.
我叫 Mitch Hedberg。 多少人看过我的段子？没人看过，那就好。今天我以前跟女朋友吵架了，我们吵架不是在房子里吵架，我们是在一个帐篷吵架。我发现帐篷 是最不适合吵架的地方，因为你在帐篷吵架的话，你不能很生气的把门关上。哎，要分，那咱们就分手吧。我有一个朋友，他给我看了他一张照片，他说：“哥，这是我以前拍的一个照片。”我说：“哥，你所有的照片都是你以前拍的照片，有你以后照的照片。” 哎，这是我以后拍 放了个剧，那个相机给我看看。这个架子有点松了，没关系，怪怪的没关系。红绿灯呢？红绿灯，绿色的意思就是 OK， 黄色的意思就是等一会儿。香蕉是相反的，香蕉黄色是 OK， 绿色是等一会儿。红色的意思就是你那香蕉哪儿买的
Anyway, so these are some Mitch Hedberg jokes, everybody. There you go. So these are fun because this is not like 中国幽默. Like you wouldn't think of it as Chinese comedy, but all the Chinese people are laughing. So what does it mean then? Well, basically, it means if you know what a traffic light is, and you know what a banana is, and you know how a banana works, and you know how a traffic light works, you should be able to get that joke. Oh, whoops. So so a lot of times I think when people say like, oh, there's Chinese comedy and there's Western comedy, really what they're saying is, I think that we're different. And I'm trying to find a way to show you that we're different, because with comedy, it's very hard. I can't just tell you something's funny. If somebody believes something's not funny, well, I can't tell you it is, but I can tell you that I've done these jokes for Chinese people in this one bar in that one night, and it was funny for them on that one bar in one night. So I think a lot of times when we think about what is funny or what isn't funny, really it has a lot more to do with how we want to see ourselves and how we want to share ourselves than whether it's actually funny or not, because there's a lot of ways to make people laugh if you're really trying to make people laugh. And there's a lot of ways to enjoy things if you're really open to enjoying them. So this also brings me to a second experiment that I did. This is Lao Wai style. So this is the week that I moved here in 2012, was right at to start the Fulbright, was right at the same time that Gangnam style, Jiangnan style was very popular in China. And a friend suggested that I make my own version of that song called Lao Wai style, about my life in China. And I said, you know what? I actually have 2 days off of my classes because of Xingqiu. So I'm actually going to do that. And we went and we shot the video all around Beijing. We took cabs everywhere. We shot the whole video in one day. I banged it together on my computer and I put it up on Youku. This is back when Youku had regular people's videos and not just made their own videos. So I put the video up on the internet, and I just expected like, oh, I'm going to show this to like my mom or something like that. But then actually, I wasn't expecting the video went viral, and it wound up getting about 3 million views on Youku. I got invited to do it on TV shows. I got invited to do it a bunch of different places. So I want to share this as well as an attempt to hit that middle area and do things that, you know, both that people in Beijing would understand, but then also Americans or foreigners abroad in China could understand about their lives. So this is with the Lao Wai style.
大哥是老外 style， 老外 style。大哥是长期住在北京的老外，每天吃中国菜也不会用少吃的老外，过马路也不懂红绿灯变绿的老外，普通老百姓的老外。可是那种老外被朋友封为 K 歌之王，那种老外在清华研究中国文化，那种老外觉得眼睛啤酒本来好喝的那种老外，大哥那老外。北京生活丰富多彩，拍照片就发微博。北京这城市我不想离开，那么多中国朋友。哥们儿姐们儿听我大声地说，说，大哥是老外 style， 老外 style， 大哥是老外 style， 老外 style， 大哥是老外 style， 老外来了。大哥是老外 style，
老王来了，大哥是老外 style.
Anyway, the whole video is up online if you want to watch it, but that's Lao Wai style, everybody. There we go. So this was fun because it was this video went viral and it really changed my life in many ways because I wasn't thinking about doing comedy videos on the internet with my time here, but I actually found it was a great way to find and take the message of what I was trying to do to connect people with comedy, put it up on the internet, and millions of people can watch it. So it's this is a new sort of thing. In fact, it was really surprising. It went viral. There was a point where if you went on Baidu and you searched Lao Wai style was the first search result. I would have searched on Google, but it was blocked. No, I have actually no idea what it would come up if you search on Google. There was all sorts of amazing things that happened because of this video. I got to do it on TV. I went and got a lot of interviews. But the weirdest thing that happened to me because of the Lao Wai style thing was this video that I found on YouTube. He sings the whole song, but he doesn't know any of the words, so he just goes like over and over again. And I have no idea who this dude is. I have no idea why he made the video. If any of you know him, tell me, because I'm really curious. So I'm just gonna finish up go into the last portion of the talk now and give you all a couple of warm tips on operating abroad, because I have been here now for many years, and I feel like whether it's Americans going to China or Chinese going to America, the skills you need to really succeed in another country are very similar. It's about figuring out how to get by. And so I wanted to give you a couple of these warm tips. Before we start, I want to remind people there's two sides of time abroad. Time one is what I call Pepsi underwear side of time abroad, which is where you walk into a supermarket and you see there's Pepsi underwear and you wonder why. But there are no answers coming. There are only questions. But then the second time of this is what I call the panoramic view of my homework side of time abroad, which is to say, in order to understand the Pepsi underwear, you need to understand the country that created the Pepsi underwear. That's the key. Other things, you need to have the right attitude. This guy on the subway across from me was passed out. He was not moving. For 3 stops, he just slouched there. But I think we can agree he had the right attitude. So that's the most important thing. So tip number 1, very important, always walk towards the strangling phenomenon. So this is a sign that I saw at a fork in the road in Yunnan when I was hiking with my friend Jake in the jungles of Xishuangbanna. And when we were there, we saw this fork in the road. And on the left side of the fork, it says the strangling phenomenon. And on the right side, it says a work shed. And if you look at this picture, you have no idea what it is. I feel like you know less about what's down the left path after looking at the picture than before looking at the picture. But we were thinking, we said, hey, there's a work shed in America, but there's only one strangling phenomenon. And that's down the left path. So we took the left path, and it turned out to be this thing that's called a strangling ficus tree. The tree is like vines. It grows down from the canopy and wraps around a bigger tree. It kills the bigger tree. The bigger tree rots away, and then it leaves this lattice work all the way up into the sky. We never would have known about it if we hadn't, followed the strangling phenomenon. Tip number 2, things mean different things in different countries, and that's okay. This guy had a box of fungus on the subway, but it's a gift box of fungus. So that's the gift. Oh, knock, knock. Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Fungus. That was the plan. But things mean different things over in different places. I had to change my idea of what a hot dog was. I saw hot dogs that I had never even imagined. I went to a restaurant. They had a special room, 666. In the West, that's the number of the devil. It's the most inauspicious number ever. The devil, but of course in China it's not inauspicious. 666 is lucky, and you know that because sometimes you'll see women just walking down the street. And it's important to remember for people in America to know, she's not opening a portal to hell. She's taking her kid down the street. It's not like she's wearing a shirt that says "Satan loves me." that would be very clear. Okay, we know what that guy's doing. So things mean different things, and that's okay. Tip number 2.5, though, is you don't control what those things mean, and that's okay, too. So this is a pink hat with rhinestones on it that says Boston, okay? And I'm from Boston, and that's not how I want Chinese people thinking about Boston, okay? Boston's like, Nanzahan, we're like really big. This is super like, Nyang sort of like, rhinestones. Yeah, I don't like it, but I got here. You have to accept it. Whatever they know, you're never going to change the whole world and everything they know. You got to figure out a way to deal with it. That's the way it works. But sometimes you don't even know what things mean, and that's okay too. What does this mean? No black cats allowed snowboarding, no strollers on the escalator, no inclined ellipses beneath mysterious shadows. The answer is actually 2. But in this case, it's good to know that's not actually a cultural thing. That's bad graphic design. That's what we need to fight. Sometimes you don't know. I went to a store that was called Hoof. I don't know what hoof means. I don't know what get ruffled means. I don't know why this guy's head is like twice the size of his body. Somebody at the office is like, 有没有人能做那个 Photoshop? He's like, 我可以啊. He's like, I can do Photoshop. And he was wrong. So I don't know why this trash can was smoking. I don't know. Never found out. I don't know why I got a watermelon in a box as a gift. So in China, it's actually very normal for people to give a gift where they'll give you fruit, but you can't just give somebody a fruit. So you put the fruit in a box. But in America, I had lived to the age of, 25, and I had never seen a watermelon in a box. And I had no idea what to do with it. So I was like, do I eat it now? I was just by myself. So I put it out on the porch and I forgot about it for 3 weeks. And at the time I was living with this big Australian guy named Garth. And Garth said, Jesse, you've got to move the watermelon. I'm like, move the watermelon? What do you do? Oh my God. And I run in and the entire watermelon has rotted inside the box. It's gone bad. And I tried to pick it up and the straps just broke because all the paper on the box was full of rotted watermelon juice. And it was awful. I spent 4 hours cleaning it up. So what I learned from this is if somebody gives you a watermelon in a box, eat it. That's all I learned. Step 4, listen to the culture because it will tell you where to look. This is the elevator in my friend's apartment building. The elevator will take you to floors 1, 5, 7, 9, and 10, which may lead you to ask, how do you get to 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8? But what China's telling you is those floors are not important. Right? So if you go in and you're asking a culture, why don't you do things one way? No one can tell you why they don't do things. But if you ask people, why do you do things this way? Maybe you'll get an answer. We never got an answer. My friend moved. But, very important. Also, once you listen and look, you still have to look for yourself. You still have to think for yourself. So this is a restaurant down the street from my house. When I first moved to China and lived by myself in my own apartment, I was like, I'm going to find a restaurant near my house. I'm going to eat there every day. And that's going to be my restaurant. And I did eat at this restaurant every day until I got dysentery. Which was very bad stomach illnesses. I was out for a week. I couldn't go to work. And my friends later were like, what did you do? And I realized that the restaurant that I went to had gotten a C on their health inspection. But it wasn't even a regular C. It was a backwards C. They got a backwards C on the health inspection. And so it was like the health inspector walked in there. He's like, I don't have a letter for this. I'm going to put the C backwards. See if it works. But tip number 5, you represent your entire nation for everything, no matter what. This is Mrs. Cui. Mrs. Cui is the wife of one of my Xiangsheng teachers, Cui Lao Shi, who I do Xiangsheng with. And the first time I met her is because I went over her house to practice Xiangsheng with her husband. And when she came in, she was very nice. She's like, 进来, oh, 有点香蕉, 吃点香蕉, like have some bananas. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. I just ate, thank you. She's like, oh, no, have some bananas. And I'm like, no, really, I'm full. She's like, have some bananas. This is not an option. And then I kept saying, no, thank you. And she kept offering me bananas. And eventually she looks at bananas and then she looks at me and she's like, oh, I guess Americans don't eat bananas. I'm like, no, that's not how this works. But then I was like, wow, this is like a magic moment. Like I'm here at the birth of a new stereotype. Like, this is how this stuff gets started. She's going to go to play mahjong with her friends. Like, no, none of the Americans eat bananas. No. I asked all of them. No. But so this is the thing is when you're traveling in a new country, you step aside, and sometimes the reasons we do things are because of culture, but sometimes also you're just not hungry. So if you meet somebody and they're doing something that's a little bit different, take the moment and stop for a moment and say, is this person doing this because of their big culture, or are they just not hungry today? And usually it's more of a personal thing, because what I've lived here for a long time, what I found is that the difference between any two people is bigger than the average distance between cultures. So most people do things because that's who they are, not because they're American or because they're Chinese. It's just who they are. So, but when I tell these stories to people in America, sometimes people will get confused or they'll get a little bit scared. They say, oh, you're living in China. It's very far away. Is China scary? Like, tell me, be honest with me. Are Chinese people scary? And I'm like, no. Chinese people aren't scary. Chinese mannequins are scary. That's the thing. I've seen so many terrifying mannequins in my time here in China. Like I have these for hours, just they go on and on forever. These are foreign children. They took their hands. I don't know what that is. I don't know what these are. I don't know. One time on the street near my house, I saw this sketchy van, and next to the sketchy van in the middle of the night at midnight, there were two mannequins that were just lying right next to there. And the van was full of dismembered mannequin parts just piled up high, and inexplicably a microwave. I have no idea what was happening there, but tip 7, know your audience, but I've been told for cultural and reasons I'm not allowed to talk about this because I did a show for Chinese government officials, and so it's not appropriate. Okay, tip number 8. You will learn new things. They will disturb you, and that's okay. This is a Beijing traffic jam. I show this people in America. This is when a guy in a 3-wheel cart goes the wrong direction in the traffic lane. None of these people ever saw their families again. I found out that 7 is the maximum amount of TVs that you can put onto a bike. It's also the maximum number of couches you can put onto a bike. You need to know that. I learned what cupping was. I went in and got fire cupping done, and so they put it on, and then if you have bad chi, it leaves a mark, and it turns out I had a lot of bad chi. But I learned all these new things, and I really was okay. And then, and the good thing about having the cupping marks on my back is I could go out and hang out without my shirt on in the park with all the old people, which was super fun. And that's where I learned the next pitch, which is that you will never, ever be cooler than an old Chinese guy. So give up right now, because you can't wear like a nipple hat like that dude. He's rocking it. These guys are all so damn cool. I took all these pictures on the same day. That's how many cool guys there are. And then finally, last tip is to be the chief of the international life. Because we're really at a very special time in human history where all the roads are built, all the plane flights connect. We can go and see each other. We can talk to each other. We can communicate on the internet. And if there are ideas that really take knowledge, that really take communication, that really take creativity, almost all that stuff has not been done yet. So we spent all the time building the roads and getting the trains up and getting the planes up. And now when we want to work together, there's a whole bunch of potential opportunities. And this is what I've learned by living here is doing Chinese comedy, because comedy is a huge thing. But as an American, when I moved to China and started doing Chinese comedy, there's almost nobody from my country here doing that. And that's because I have what I call the magic China formula, is whatever you like to do plus how they do that in China equals you're almost the only person doing it. And a lot of this applies the other way for Chinese people going to America. If there's something you like to do that has to do with China and you go to America, there's not going to be a lot of Chinese people doing that, because a lot of the Chinese people studied econ or business. And if you do something outside of econ or business, you're going to have a lot of areas where you can do stuff. So one of the ways that I did this is I started doing another hobby of mine, trying to take advantage of this, is that I like doing rap. So I do Chinese rap. But the thing is in China, because I'm Western and rap comes from the West, in China, I'm like a real rapper, which is crazy. So my rap group is very important. Everybody knows there was a Ming dynasty, and then there was the Qing dynasty, and then there was me, the Bling dynasty. So I'm gonna do one Bling dynasty rap song for you guys right now. One or two. How much time do we have? We're actually almost out of time. I'm gonna do one Bling dynasty rap song for you guys. So this is this song. So I don't know. Have any of you ever heard there's a famous rap song in America called Mo Money, Mo Problems? More money, more problems. So the thing about more money, more problems is they keep talking about you get more money, you got more problems, right? But in China, like there's more money, but there are problems, but also there's a lot of good stuff. So I think the Chinese version of this I call Mo Money, Mo Fajon. Because, more money, Mo Fajon. And so a lot of rap, I was thinking about this a lot, is that a lot of rap, it's really very microeconomic. It's like, I bought this car or I bought that bottle of champagne. It's like very small things. But I was like, nobody's making rap about the whole economy, right? So that's why I decided to make a bilingual rap song about the economy of China called Mo Money, Mo Fajon. And it goes like this. Gonna hit you all with some Mo Money, Mo Fajon. Here we go. Breaking it down. Starting off in the late Qing Dynasty. Right. Here we go. Live. 雷霆 no bling， 封建社会 all up in this place， 鸦片战争遍地的混乱，自己养的狗他妈把车真的spot， 铁路抗议帝国压力，好像不也跟着发展很经济 ，100 days of war 脱裤子放屁 ，we need a better economic policy. Things all change when Sun Shot hit the block. Ian is 民国 messaging up， 民主社会经济的拓展，开始缺资本主义的思想。 内战、二战，社会主义发展，毛泽东建立新中国的现象，大跃进都在那，文革10年混乱，到底说这个经济怎么发展 ？I don't know， 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across， more 发展 we see。I don't know， 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across， more 发展 we see。Then we got my drummer 邓小平。 The man was eating of ice cold bling. Got Southern tour was a tour de force. 我的经济计划 to the Southern shores. 经济的方向谁都不知道，白毛黑毛不是特别重要，一切先让一切富起来。Now we living it up, we all高富帅。We got the SEC to raise the GDP to get the PRC into the G20. Attract the MNCs but keep the 国际，这是中国特色社会主义。Learn English by night, learn math by day. Put in 10 subway lines for the 奥运会。 Build roads in Xinjiang and trains in Xizang. Rebuild the Changcheng and dam the Changjiang. Corporate Xiangsheng. Don't talk about Taiwan. 是这些乐观，是这些悲惨。The scale is 广泛 ，the base is 疯狂。And you know it's all when I say 改革开放。I don't know 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across, more 发展 we see. I don't know 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across. More 发展 we see， 以前是平房 ，now we 高楼大厦，百货商店的 take up the whole block， 高速公路跟高铁服务，民外互动文化不断在继续。舞蹈和我永存10年前，now it's all 韩国人来火锅店，山寨 DVDs 跟智能手机 ，we got 3D、3G 跟三国演义 ，we got 农民工 selling fake iPhones， 富二代 bragging about the second homes， kids playing Temple Run with posters of late fun， guys train the gym, it's the only way to get guns. Our parents in one class, no deaths in another. A generation brought up without sisters or brothers. 牛奶有毒，奶粉有毒，钱要越多，问题数不胜数。We got lots of posers who want to 投资，该过美美，上女人屌丝。We got 13例要领 KFC, and now it's those face still on the renminbi, singing I don't know 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across, more 发展 we see. I don't know 怎么发展的经济好像呢 ？More money we come across, more 发展 we see. All right, more money, more 发展 everybody. There we go. So I think our hour is over. I'm happy to stay a little bit later and do Q&A if you want to. I don't know whether everybody has meetings, but I want to thank everybody so much for coming. Thank you so much for the invitation in and to the Google. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.